So in this segment, we're going to be talking about experts even warn over post-Brexit UK rule changes on chemicals. So this is it now. This is the big move. They're going to look at deregulation of chemicals. This is terrifying. The government is planning to water down the regulatory requirements on key chemicals in what experts could fear be the first move to a weaker post-Brexit safety regime for potentially toxic chemicals. Proposals published last week without fanfare on a government website. They're not really publicly announcing this yet. They're going to try and sneak this one through, I believe. Set out some of the intended new rules for the new post-Brexit national chemicals regulator. The proposals would change the way substances of very high concern, which include potential toxins and carcinogenics and chemicals that persist for a long time in the environment, are dealt with. So these are the dangerous ones that can do massive harm to humans and wildlife, but also the environment in general. So under EU law, these chemicals are formally identified and publicly listed on a candidate list, while authorities analyse them and decide whether to ban them or allow their use in certain circumstances by transferring them to an authorization list. So essentially what the EU does is they'll look at the chemicals first and they'll say, look, if these are dangerous, under what circumstances can you use them? Some being probably none, and some being under very few limited avenues. Companies must inform regulators that their supply chains when dealing with products containing these candidate list chemicals, encouraging them to use alternatives. So they have to, when companies want to use these dangerous chemicals, have to tell the regulator that, look, we're using this dangerous chemical on this list. Can we do? Basically allow us. We're doing this, but they are encouraged to use alternatives, probably on a secondary list, and there would have to be certain circumstances. They'll have to justify their use, most likely. Under the government's proposals, companies will not be obliged to submit information on substances of very high concern, but will be allowed to do so on a voluntary basis. So what you're saying is when these chemicals are used, companies won't have to be upfront about where they're being used and for what purpose. It's on a voluntary list. That's insane. Like, this stuff could cause massive environmental damage, but you're going to be like, oh yeah, you can tell us if you're using them or not. So what happens when things go wrong and these chemicals get into the water or get into human consumption by whatever means, and companies don't have to disclose what they've done, what chemicals they're using? This is crazy. Only chemicals likely to be transferred to the authorization list would be on the candidate list, meaning a smaller number of notifiable chemicals will be analysed, which is disastrous. Zoe Avison, policy analyst at Green Alliance think tank, said relying on voluntary data submission by chemical companies will almost certainly see hazardous substances falling through the cracks. This is more of an American thing, I think, massively deregulating the regulators, essentially, and making it optional for companies to be upfront. The UK could have made sensible arrangements to reduce costs for industry and safeguard public health, yet the government has boxed itself into a corner after the new delay for companies to submit safety data for UK markets. This is a very worrying sign for the future of chemical regulation, and this does make potentially exports to the EU more problematic, because the EU are going to want declarations of certain chemicals that are being used. Experts told The Guardian they were concerned about the government's move could weaken protections against harmful substances and allow potentially toxic chemicals to slip through the net. Let's not forget here, some of these companies are dumping massive amounts of raw sewage into our waterways. Imagine if some of these dangerous chemicals also get into those waterways, water that we drink from. Michael Warhurst, executive director of ChemTrust, a charity that campaigns on harmful chemicals, said it seems that the government is putting in unnecessary layers of information requirements before taking action, because they don't want to take action. This is what happens when you're part of a low regulation society, which will lead to regulatory inaction on a harmful of dangerous substances. This will open the door to British consumers and the environment having greater exposure to harmful chemicals than in the EU, and second-rate systems for regulating chemicals post-Brexit. And again, this doesn't benefit anyone. Making these changes doesn't benefit anyone. It just causes more harm. Jamie Page of Cancer Prevention and Education Society added, "We are now concerned that protections that British citizens previously enjoyed are now being eroded. The more the UK diverges from the EU REACH registration, evaluation, authorization and restriction of chemicals system and database, the more likely people are to be exposed to hazardous chemicals. And once this stuff gets out into the wild, that's it. It's going to be very hard to change back what you've done." if the stuff gets in the water, we eat from those waterways. People fish, and we eat those fish. River fishing. Again, this stuff very dangerous. The proposals by the government will not be subject to public consultation and will not require a vote in Parliament. I mean, that's insane. How is that democratic? How can they get away with that? Not allowing a vote in Parliament. They can just do this. No one can stop them. No parliamentary consultation. Nothing. Just done. Under post-Brexit legal arrangements, ministers can make such alterations without discussions. That right there, you're wandering more into a dictatorship. And that big Tory majority have allowed this. So if this stuff gets into the world and you have a Tory MP, you should ask them, what are you going to do about it? If these chemicals get into the wild, what the hell are you going to do? A spokesperson for the Department of DEFRA said, we are committed to maintaining an effective regulatory system for the management of controls of chemicals. Well, you're not. Well, safeguards, which safeguards human health and the environment, can respond to emerging risks. Well, you're not reacting to the sewage being dumped into the waterways, are you? We have published our interim approach to the candidate list in UK Reach. Could have come up with a more better name, because we just jacked the EU one. This approach aims to ensure we have a single, coherent approach to nominating substances for the candidate list. But again, why are you deregulating this? It doesn't make any sense. There's no consultation. It's just you guys doing this with nothing. You haven't informed the public. And I remember watching coverage from Ring of Fire, where they talked about Mike Papantonio, where he did a documentary called The Devil We Know. It's meant to be on Netflix, but I think it's only on American Netflix, where he talks about the chemicals being dumped into the waterways. Citizens in West Virginia take on powerful corporations after they discover it had knowingly been dumping a toxic chemical now found in the blood of 99.7% of Americans into local drinking water supplies. This very scenario could potentially happen, and we wouldn't be aware of it until it's too late. 99.7% of Americans have been found to have this toxic chemical, and it may not kill you straight away, but you might develop, really bad health conditions and potentially fatal ones if you ingest these chemicals. That's why you have strong regulations. But clearly we have the regulators from Raccoon City who have no idea what they're doing, and it's going to cause absolute havoc in this country. I mean, why do this? This doesn't really benefit anyone apart from if you're in the business of chemicals or you use these chemicals. That's it. Like, this thing is insane. Why do this? I don't understand. But this is, Brexit Britain. But what more can I say apart from let me know what you think in the comments below. Like, comment, share, subscribe, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one.